members of the board and the public that is here with us and the public that is viewing. I have many comments actually under my comments tonight, but first and foremost, I want to start with a school safety update. I'd like to have Deputy County Administrator Dr. James Worsley come up to introduce this topic, but we have a host and a way of just illustrating that this is a county and a school that works together as best we can. So you'll hear segments of this school safety update from our school officials as well as from police, but Dr. Worsley will also reference the roles that mental health, social services, and maybe others also play. Dr. Worsley.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Casey. Today, I would like to emphasize to our listening audience that school safety is highly important to this Board of Supervisors, Chesterfield County Police, and Chesterfield County Public Schools. Shortly, you will hear comments from Lieutenant Colonel Brad Badgerow from the Chesterfield County Police Department, and you will see a presentation on the topic of school safety and security from Mr. Josh Davis, Chief Operations Officer, and Mr. Pike Glenn, Assistant Director of Safety and Security. Both are with the Chesterfield County Public Schools. Before I turn the microphone and the podium over to Lieutenant Colonel Badgerow, there are a few things that I would like to highlight for awareness as related to school safety in Chesterfield County. One, the Commonwealth of Virginia Office of the Governor signed Executive Order number 28 titled Parental Notifications, Law Enforcement Collaboration, and Student Education to Prevent Student Overdoses on November 1st, 2023. The Superintendent of Public Instruction and the Department of Education are directed to do a few things. One, issue guidance regarding the notification of all parents within a school division through regular communication channels within 24 hours of a school-connected student overdose, while always ensuring protection of student privacy. Secondly, issue guidance outlining close collaboration between local school divisions and state law enforcement to prevent student overdoses. And thirdly, provide information to local school divisions and parents about education programs for students to develop decision-making skills and prevent violations of Virginia law, including state and federal efforts such as One Pill Can Kill campaign, which is led by the First Lady of Virginia and the Attorney General, and the Attorney General's Virginia Rules program. In addition to these things, Chesterfield County Department of Social Services plays an integral role in the safety of children in our community, and at our schools, Social Services provides the following services that help to ensure that safety of children is maintained. Mandated reporter training is provided to school and county employees and community partners. Child Protective Services manages the CCPS hotline where community members can call in concerns regarding families. Community consultations. Family preservation staff provides consultations to county departments and school staff regarding situations where safety and well-being concerns are identified. Suggestions of ways to assist the family are provided to the lead department serving this particular family or those families. Family preservation. Families who do not meet the CPS criteria can choose to voluntarily work with the social services staff to improve the overall functioning and stability of their family. Child care subsidy is another point. The department oversees the eligibility determination process for child care subsidy. Child care has been found to support children and families as well as serve as protective factor for children who are at risk of abuse and neglect. Multidisciplinary team. We serve on the county's MDT in collaboration with St. Mary's Hospital, police, and the Child Advocacy Center. Likewise, Chesterfield County Mental Health Support Services stand ready to assist families and schools when services are needed. For example, a mental health emergency services staff provides case consultation whenever needed by Chesterfield County Public Schools personnel. A certified pre-screener from Mental Health Support Services performs the pre-screening evaluation, locates and secures a bed in a psychiatric facility, contacts the magistrate, and coordinates transportation to the hospital. Now, at this time, I would like to invite Lieutenant Badgerow to the podium for comments on behalf of Chesterfield County Police. And immediately following will be Mr. Josh Davis, Chief Operation Officer with Chesterfield County Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Lieutenant Colonel.
Close enough. Mr. Chair, members of the board, Dr. Casey, thank you very much for an opportunity to offer some comments about such an important topic to Chesterfield County, but specifically for Chesterfield County Police Department. I think many of you are aware that some years ago, we really went through the work of identifying who we are and why we exist. We've put those into 4 Ps. I think many of you are aware of those. Why we exist, and the 4 Ps are protecting human life, preservation of vulnerable populations, problem-solving partnerships, and our personnel, attracting and procuring top-tier talent. When we speak of something as important as student and school safety, nothing is as important as how that fits into our 4 Ps, especially the idea of protecting the vulnerable, the population that we serve in that regard. We have a very important responsibility in that regard. So to that end, last year, one of our SMART goals was specific to this vulnerable population of juveniles, and we decided that we were going to address any number of those in a SMART goal specific way. We decided that we were going to try to increase and work on our online child predator operations. We did 16 of those this past year in 2023. We have another one scheduled coming up here in a little bit, but we have arrested over 30 people in those operations. And you figure if we are continuing to move towards preservation of life and protecting the vulnerable in that way, it's very important that we continue those online child predator operations. Outside of schools, many of you are aware of the fact that we identified the need to start a police activities league. They're typically called police athletic leagues, but since it isn't strictly focused on athletics, we decided we would call it our police activity league. This past year, our police activity league was involved in over 30 operations throughout the year. We contacted hundreds of students and over thousands of our community members, from things like bocce ball to baseball to Bear Creek Lake to things like Aviation Day to different camping events, different hiking events, things along those lines. We're pretty proud of the impact that we have had in that regard. As has already been mentioned, the social service side of things, the police are involved in that as well. And if we're talking about specifically in school settings, police have been involved in 126 threat assessments in the schools for 2023. I don't have numbers on the entire number of threat assessments that have been done in the schools. The protocol calls for us to be involved in all the high imminent designations, and we have numbers for 126 of those. Part and parcel to that is, we wear many hats, both in and out of the schools, but in the schools we have been involved in 18 emergency custody and temporary detention order situations involving the vulnerable population of our mental health community. And then if it comes to it, from time to time, we are called to be involved in the enforcement side of things in schools. When we are notified of events that we need to put our enforcement hat, then we have been involved in over 500 misdemeanor arrests in 23 and right around 50 felony arrests, 7 of those being guns that were identified and taken out of schools in calendar year 2023. So a lot of times we think about how our SROs are involved, and I think many of you have been involved in the discussion and how we have worked towards education on the whole idea of the school to prison pipeline, how that is something that we are combating, that theory, because our SROs are involved in more mentoring and teaching and coaching activities than they are in anything else in our schools. 19 out of 24 of our SROs are either coaches or mentors or involved in extracurricular activities at their schools. And we're very proud of the fact that we are much more than strictly an enforcement agent. We are friends, we are partners, we are mentors, we are coaches in those situations. And we continue to seek additional methods of communication and partnership with our schools. Problem-solving partnerships and engaging in those is one of our 4 Ps. And as much as we're able, we keep those doors open with our partners at CCPS. In any relationship, as you can imagine, you have good days and bad days, and we continue to work through things to make sure that we are headed together as partners in the avenue of school safety, student safety, and making sure that our children are thriving and are in a place where they can be the best that they can be. And as we can wear our hats and help guide and usher that along, that's what we're committed to do. Any questions?
Board members, any questions? Mr. Winslow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So thank you for being here. I think back to our appointment and time on the School Safety Task Force, Mr. Holland, and the work that we spent that summer with many stakeholders, including the Virginia Homeland Security Chief and so many others, security experts, students, parents, teachers, and of course, members of our police force. And a couple of things that you said sort of struck me, and one of the things that sort of impactful is when you are notified, you're able to respond when you are notified. And this is something that affects every school division in the Commonwealth. So I guess I have some questions. Are you being notified of all incidents that are occurring that are criminal in nature in our school system?
Not all. The state code calls for a certain criteria of incidents to be mandatory notifications. So I would say those on a regular basis, yes, we are in good shape with those, but not all.
And so in that second category where it's not mandatory, are there any trends in what you're being notified about versus what you're not being notified about?
Anecdotally, I'll tell you that the school system is a large organization, right? And so we have depending on which way you want to look at that, we have our school resource officers in every middle and high school, as you're aware. We don't have personnel stationed in our elementary schools. And in many regards, outside of the mandatory reporting, it is up to the individual principal and maybe the admin that he or she might contact to determine whether or not they see fit to let police know, and if they do, when along the line they will bring us in.
So just to follow up on that, each principal or each administration in each school sort of has their own discretion about whether or not to bring it to the attention of CCPD. We're talking about whatever incident might be at hand.
I'd be remiss if I said that I knew exactly what their protocol was necessarily, but I can tell you that from our working relationships in the schools, our school resource officers and the relationship that they have with their admin, it's not consistent across the board. So in school A, you may have an admin team that is fully supportive of everything that we're there to do and say, hey, how can we partner on this across the board? School B, it may not be quite as robust communication and partnership.
Okay, and you stated that, let me ask you this, are you aware of any protocol that all principals have to follow? Is there a standard protocol for all principals to follow when an incident occurs as it relates to reporting to CCPD?
Outside of the MOU that we have that exists with CCPS and the specific language that speaks to code for the mandatory reporting, I don't know of any regulations or guidelines or protocol from CCPS that would speak to that.
And is there any explanation given as to the variability between, in your example, School A and School B, and how they address reporting of incidents to CCPD?
I'm sorry, the question was, is there any explanation for that?
Sure.
Not to my knowledge, other than they're their own individual entity in some regard. And again, there may be a policy or a protocol that I'm not aware of from CCPS that there is some level of notification, but I can just tell you from the working side of things that there is a difference.
So all schools have threat assessment teams in place, correct?
Correct.
And is CCPD part of all threat assessment teams?
Yes, by the MOU, we are part of the threat assessment team that schools employs.
And that at least is uniform countywide?
It is.
Okay.
I don't want to answer a question that wasn't asked, but I can tell you
Please.
that within the...
Answer a question that wasn't asked.
Okay.
That's fine.
Within the protocols of the threat assessment, there are a number of levels. No threat, transient, low, maybe high, moderate, and high imminent. According to the MOU, the high imminent are the only ones that require CCPD to be notified.
Who determines high imminent?
The team that is doing the assessment. And if I'm not mistaken, for certain levels of initial assessment, it would require a couple staff personnel from schools that have some different choices there, counselors, psychologists, other admin. And then if it's a high imminent, then it requires at least one admin to be part of that.
But there's no member of the police department or the police force?
Not
that
for
is-
every assessment.
That
no.
is helping to determine what level we're
Not
talking
everyone,
about.
no, sir.
Okay. So another thing that you said was, in any relationship, there are good days and there are bad days.
Sure.
And you referenced the 7 guns incidents that were discovered this year. So that's an alarming statistic for us as we sit here without having any major incidents, fortunately for all of us, happen in Chesterfield. But a bad day in this relationship could be a real bad day for someone or families or all of us. And so I'm just going to leave it there and just say that I think this area needs tightening up because we can't have bad days with this relationship. And I'll say it to, I won't say it to Mr. Davis. He's here and he's doing a great job with facilities, and I love Mr. Davis, so I'm just going to say that. He's fantastic. But this notion that the school system can police itself, that the school system has its own expertise or can write the laws in such a way that it decides what's criminal and what's not. If it's not handled correctly, we're going to have an issue in this county. And with this relationship has to be tighter. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Winslow. Dr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to follow up on just one of the questions that Mr. Winslow is asking. Can you outline for us what would be mandated? What are those things that the school must tell the police about?
I'm going to be going by memory,
Okay.
based on code, and I'm not going to be able to give you the entire listing, but it is assaults with injury, threats to bomb, firearms offenses, drug offenses, and there probably are a few more of the what we might consider serious crimes. And I'm sorry I don't have that right in front of me. I apologize.
So if I received an email, hypothetically, from a parent, and they are reporting that their student was a victim of sexual assault, would that be something that would have been needed to be mandatorily reported?
So I will tell you that probably if you asked 5 of us to define a sexual assault, we might put different terminology to that and maybe different levels of severity, depending on what we think that looks like. It's very possible that if somebody were to report a sexual assault, it would fall into the category of a injurious assault. It's possible. But it's also possible that if it were a simple assault, what we might consider a simple assault, right, that it wouldn't fall into that category. And it would be up to whoever it was reported to and whoever knew about it to determine whether or not it fit the criteria for that mandatory disclosure.
How is injurious defined? Is that where the individual had to go to the hospital? Are we talking psychological?
Yeah, it would be more of a physical thing than it would be a traumatic or psychological.
Okay.
That's the way the code would look at it.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Holland?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Winslow mentioned earlier, we were on a task force with the Speaker of the House, General Assembly, and a few others to work on this area of course, safety in our schools, and we came up with a number of recommendations that were done. Where's your recommendation, Ned? What do you think we need to do to get ahead of this curve, if you will, relative to what's going on in the schools in terms of uniformity, in terms of what we can do to assist you and the police department relative to this area?
If we consider things in terms of a relationship,
Okay.
I think that across the board, transparent, open communication is the key to making sure that our students are safe, that our community is safe, that we can partner together truly to, we may not have all the answers, schools may not have all the answers, social services may not have all the answers, but when we put our resources together, we're going to get there. But without that willingness to come to the table and, in all situations, because I'm not going to say that this is the worst thing ever, but you figure, as Mr. Winslow mentioned, we can't afford to have a bad day. We can't afford to have a situation where the communication isn't robust and transparent and open with no silos, so that we can together make sure that our students are safe.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, because I believe in proactive moving, not retroactively looking back as to what we should have done, but what should we be doing is the essence of what I'm alluding to at this point. And we certainly await some suggestions and or recommendations how to move forward to eliminate a silo, if you will. So thank you for being here, and thanks for that insight.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Engel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It sounds like, so you can tell me if you agree with me or not, that you're suggesting that if we hold people accountable for their actions, but we also put wraparound services to the people that may be acting out because they may need some services, and that may be the cause of their services, that we are keeping our students safe and we're taking care of the students that may need other services as well, and that we have a team in place in the county to do that, but we don't at this point have 100% communication between the team to ensure that that's happening. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir. I agree with much of that. The team, the threat assessment team, if that's what you're mentioning, may not be the end-all be-all of that communication, right? Because there are certainly plenty of times where things are identified crimes have occurred and police feel like, okay, we have a heading here, we're going to do what we feel we need to do from an enforcement side of things, right? And for the sake of everybody, I have a human services heart. I'm the mental health liaison for the police department. That is near and dear to who I am and how we lead our people. So we're not a hammer that comes in to say, you know what, this is who we are as a police department. But there needs to be, as you mentioned, consequences and accountability for when crimes occur, that things happen the right way, as opposed to either not sharing that information or not holding people accountable to our students to keep them safe. And then the whole threat assessment is the other side of that, which, again, I can't tell you how many threat assessments were done across the school division. I can tell you that we were a part of 126 of them. But, there's plenty more than that.
Dr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to remind me, who serves on the threat assessment team besides the police officer?
There are a number of titles of people within the schools that can serve in that regard, from admin to counselor to psychologist to, there are a couple others, and I'm sorry, I don't have the title terminology committed to memory.
Typically, how many people serve on it?
Well, so the way my understanding of those are the folks who can sit. So it's not like you have 6 people at every one of these things, right? They would decide, okay, in this case, we're going to have these 2 folks do the assessment. And then if it rose to a high imminent threat level, then they would loop PD in. That's the way it should work.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lieutenant Colonel, thank you for your time. I think that certainly moving on in the future, if the board has any other questions, we'll certainly contact yourself or the chief. And certainly if there's anything from a legislative perspective that needs to be worked on, that the Chiefs of Police Association is working on, and the General Assembly that affects this issue, I would ask that we be made aware of that so that we can work with our legislative people as well to see if we can help affect any necessary changes to, obviously put us in the best possible situation to work together with the school system to provide the safest environment for our children and for our teachers and employees that work in those schools. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Davis.
Good evening, Honorable Chair, Dr. Casey, members of the board. Thank you for providing this opportunity. This is a huge subject, and our job is never done. And we have occasionally reached some milestones, so I do want to share a few of those in regards to some of our recent enhancements in regards to physical security with you and the impacts of them. So these are the topics to include things we've been working on for a while. The security cameras, the vestibules are a little newer, and we've got a new grant that's going to allow us to put some protective film. One of those milestones is that each and every one of our schools now has a working camera system. Over 7,100 of them are deployed. So the final elementary school was finished this fall, but the job's never done. Technology changes, so we're looking at the replacement cycle at our high schools. We've already started work at Monacan, followed by Byrd, Meadowbrook, Carver Career. We're going to continue to move on. I'm going to show you a little evidence in terms of why we need to move on in regards to the quality of what we're getting. So much of what you were just talking about, and I'm not sure I can dig too deeply into the threat assessments and so forth, but we work really hard on training. My note here about 400 staff being trained to use these systems is relevant to those systems. I'm going to take this opportunity to mention Mr. Pike, who is our Assistant Director for Safety and Security. I told him one of the best compliments I thought I could give him is he gets things done. I give him a mission, he accomplishes, and then he goes and does some more. He gets things done, and he knows that we have to train our staff out at our individual schools that each have their own unique leader. And we have been able to turn the dial up in regards to issues such as training our administrators, ensuring that they get their drills done, things that have been addressed back at the Safety Task Force and by some audits that I'm going to discuss earlier also. I'll also just briefly mention, that we're finding opportunities to link the products of our camera system to the police when needed and appropriate. And that's going to be another positive enhancement in the very near future. So how have things improved? If you look at our camera system 5 years ago, we were at a quarter megapixel. It was barely worth having it. You could see that some people were there. But the cameras that we've been installing the last 2 or 3 years are 10 plus megapixels. And that's just an example of an image that Mr. Pike has used to help solve and figure out something that took place at a school after hours once. So that really has helped. We've talked about parking lots and places that are beyond the range of the cameras that are mounted on the exterior of our buildings. And we've learned, and I know the police are looking into this too, about mobile systems. And so we are piloting a system that just arrived, I believe, last week and is now active this week at one of our high schools where we've had some needs. So just showing you a picture of the system. It's solar powered, it can move. If there's a football game, we could roll it over by the stadium. If there's an event at another school that we need to watch, we could do that. And so it can help us cover those large parking lots, athletic events. And we're very interested in learning about this capability and perhaps getting a fleet of these, because we think that type of capability will be very useful in the future. This just happened to be one vendor that we shopped with, you might say, but we know that there are others that are out there, so we're going to go through a procurement process as we look at expanding this capability more seriously. The vestibules. We have analyzed every building, and I mean, this is the superintendent's business. He has been out to the buildings and determined which ones were satisfactory and already had the design in place, such as our brand newer schools. They've got a great vestibule where everybody's channeled into the front office. But we've got a project well underway. This is showing some of the projects that have been complete already. I believe we see from the upper left and around Matoaka Middle, Clover Hill High, Matoaka High, and what's the bottom one there, Glenn? Oh, Tomahawk Creek. Yeah, those were just recently completed. Some were last winter, a few this past summer, and we've got others underway. This is Jacobs Road, and Scott Carson told me today it's been painted now, so it looks better than what you see now. But large numbers of schools are still under the knife, you might say. But we've had some success with our procurement process and getting some contractors in to get this work done. These work well. Scott mentioned to me today when he went to Jacobs Road, it looked like this was part of the original design and belonged there. So we're grateful that, again, we've had the resources to do this and that we're managing very quickly to try to get all of these in place so that at each and every school, every visitor will be channeled to that front office. I mentioned the door and window film. We've fortunately been the beneficiaries of many grants in safety and security, but this newer one is a federal grant through the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, grant through VDOE, and we're going to install this 3M safeguard film. It's going to help with personal safety from flying and broken glass, prevent somebody easily smashing and grabbing something, and protection from windstorms, blast, and earthquakes. We've been pleased by the pricing that we received from a vendor, so we're getting ready to enter the procurement process to exercise this grant, and we believe that with a little year-end money, we can do this at each and every one of our schools. We have been the subject of audits in the last couple of years. The first one that was completed almost a year ago was emergency response preparedness. It took a look at the schools, the teams, whether it's their emergency readiness teams, their safety teams, and the audits that they conduct, the drills and the training and emergency communications, gave us some good recommendations. I heard some discussion of protocols earlier. That's also part of Glenn's job, is to work on recommendations to ensure that we do have those processes in place, because we are a school system. We're not a system of schools. We love that we have 67 independent leaders, but they need to work within our system. And in these areas where we need enhanced protocols to ensure that the right calls are made at the right time, not everybody learns the first time you tell them either. So that's why we repeat things and come back to the board. And like I said, the job's never done. The physical security audit was just completed. A lot of it is confidential, but it does look at safety requirements and best practices. It shows a whole sundial of things that we're doing in regards to physical security. Take some notes in regards to how we administer some of those systems in regards to the automated piece, how long we keep the data, and so forth. And so tries to help us align with some best practices and how we go about testing those systems. So that's the news that I had for you this evening. Glad to chat about some other elements. It is, like I said, it's a really big topic. We're not here to talk budget with you and staffing and personnel, but obviously, that's part of the equation too. Mr. Pike does have a couple more folks than he used to, both in terms of camera technicians and folks that can respond to incidences. But he remains the hub. We talked, y'all were just talking about communications. We've got a chief of communications that, tells our principals, let me know, not Josh, but let him know, Sean Smith, let Glenn know, so that they can ensure that PD is called as soon as possible when necessary. And they have the wherewithal to call PD also. And we want them to take that step when necessary, because seconds can make a difference in some of these scenarios. We talk about training, but we also, exercises are important. We need to put our leaders through scenarios and make them think. And whether it's a routine day-to-day activity that they need to address, or some of those situations that we hope never occur, but they've got to think about them, and we need to exercise those communications. And we look forward to continuing to enhance our partnership with the police and all the first responders, mental health team, other folks mentioned by Dr. Worsley. So I'd be happy to take any comments and questions at this time, and I've got Mr. Pike to back me up if I can't get into the appropriate details.
Board members, questions or comments? Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. With regard to the cameras, how long are those recordings kept?
21 days.
Do you feel that that's long enough?
It has been long enough in every circumstance. There is a recommendation to perhaps enhance that to 30 days. So we are going to look at the cost of doing that in the future. But, occasionally you get somebody that makes a statement about something that happened 4 or 5 months ago. And so whether it's 21 or 30 days, that's not going to make a relevant difference. Okay. But there is obviously expense in regards to building that storage capacity.
Right.
So.
Thank you. And then the other question is, with those cameras, are they cameras that you go back and look at later, or is there a room in which folks are watching those cameras on the facility to see what's happening, what's going on? Do you understand my
You
question?
can do both. Yeah.
So you can do, does something like that exist at the schools where someone's watching?
They don't have the staff for that, no.
Don't do that? Okay.
Not at this point. That's one of those budget discussions that we're going to get into. But
Okay. Thank you.
But there are certain staff members. Frankly, we looked at snow the other morning. We can look at external cameras to see what the weather looks like in the sidewalks. But obviously, looking into a building, during the school day, if something's going on, that there are a few of us that have that capability. But it's not widespread throughout the school division. And it can, of course, happen at a building. And if an administrator wants to look, he can sit at his desk and look at anywhere in his building at any time live. Glenn, did I get that right?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Winslow.
I would like to ask Mr. Pike a question, if I can, please. Good to see you.
You too. Thank you for your service, sir.
The same, sir. Thank you. You're keeping everybody safe, and we appreciate your work. Could you please describe the variability of how principals deal with incidents or interruptions throughout the school day? And what's an acceptable amount of variability right now within the school division?
Most of the principals have had numerous years of experience, and we depend on that greatly. Pardon me. Like I said, their years of experience, and we depend on that tremendously. If it disrupts the flow of what's going on, the educational flow and the operational scheme of what's going on, then they have the determination to alter their scheme, limit the access of students going out, movement within the building. You know, so they have a variety of tools available to them to react. They also, they know they can call one of us in a need and run it past us, whether it be an academic director or someone in my office or someone in our communications office.
Is there a uniform set of standards all school principals, vice principals, et cetera, admin are supposed to follow with regard to reporting incidents to CCPD?
No, sir. Other than what Lieutenant Colonel was saying earlier, you know, there are mandatory ones. There are incidents that take place at schools, such as, say, a schoolyard fight, for instance, between two, you know, tender-age children, or you know, inappropriate language, which in the public sector might be a crime. Those are things that, you know, obviously wouldn't be reported. They'd be handled from an administrative perspective.
Is the division looking at that at all as an issue or as something that they need to tweak, or is there anything in process on that
There's
topic?
nothing currently in the process, but it is something we have generally discussed, but as to what level. And again, it would have to be something that we'd have to work with the police department through the MOU on how we would structure that as to what type of offenses that would be, you know, the offenses that we would want to report to the police department.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I have one brief question. I know some years ago we discussed the possibility of using apps at the admin level with principals where they could notify immediately someone in central office, someone in the police department. Is that in place, or is that something we have gotten away from?
Yes, sir, it is in place. Dr. Doherty had one that he was familiar with when he arrived. It's called Rave.
Okay.
And I goes off on my phone some days, good days. Some days it goes off frequently. It's mostly used for medical emergencies, you know, just to kind of give you a flavor for what we hear. Child having a seizure and the EMS has been called. You know, obviously if PD's called for an incident, you know, sometimes they don't even use the app. They just go directly to the phone to make sure folks are aware. But it's whenever they feel that they need help from an emergency. And Glenn's team automatically calls that building as soon as we get an alert from the app to see what's going on, what can we do to come help, who needs help, and for what reason.
Thank you.